I love making stuff out of EVA foam and light it up. And not with the power of fire, but with physics and blinky LEDs. Last year though was a sad year. Even though we made a ton of really amazing stuff, none of it light up. So I thought this year must be different. This year I'm going to start the year with a massive claymore out of EVA foam and a ton of LEDs. And it will be glorious, yes! So thanks so much to Genshin Impact who asked us to bring Mavuika sword 1000 Blazing Suns to life. Its design is seriously so pretty and I love it so much. Mavuika was just added to the game as a playable character and is the fire archon of Natlan. If you never heard of Genshin Impact before, just check out the link in the video description. The game is super fun, has a huge world to explore and is completely free for mobile, PlayStation and PC. But now enough of talking, let's start crafting. So first let's check out the reference of Mavuika's sword, or better, her claymore. Its design is super pretty, but it would be quite challenging to create it with this huge hole in the middle. That's usually the part where the rod goes for stability. Luckily though, the sword gets a light up rocket engine as soon as Mavuika holds it in her hands. So I got an idea for the construction. Next on, Benny drew me a blueprint in Adobe Illustrator based on the in-game screenshots. We actually couldn't get the 3D model this time, so this might not end up 100% accurate. And yes, I actually got Mavuika and 1000 Blazing Suns on my account. To get the scale right, we directly compared my full body 3D scan with some screenshots of her. According to that, the sword would be 230 cm, but I guess that's a bit too much to handle in real life. I felt much more comfortable with 180 cm. It would be still massive, but it's a much better size to handle. Then Benny printed me out the blueprint, I taped and cut everything out, and this was the paper dummy. How do you like the size? Next up, I grabbed some PVC pipes in different thicknesses and glued them together with a ton of super glue. The end piece was actually a fiberglass rod to protect the soft foam tip later. Now the real construction could finally begin. As always, we used our trusty Beambox laser cutter to speed up the process. It's obviously possible to cut everything by hand, but we also had to work with a pretty tight schedule as always. For additional stability, we also laser cut a few small wood pieces and worked with high density EVA foam. My glue of choice was contact cement. And by the way, most materials I used here are from my favorite crafting store, Cosplay Shop BE. Once I prepared all the base layers, I covered up the grip with 2mm foam and drilled in some holes. But holes for what, you ask? Well, this was the plan. I'm going to cover all the edges of the blade with LED strips and will create the fire effect of the rocket engine as well. Then all those wires will be pulled through this hole at the grip, which also gets a little switch, and the whole microcontroller chip and the battery will be then placed inside the pommel at the end. At least I hope this would work. First though, I had to finish the base layers with some additional fiberglass rods for the stability and add a little bit more thickness on top. Now onto the LEDs. I decided to go with 60 LEDs per meter as they are pretty power saving, but still bright enough. Then I carefully glued them all around both blades and attached some wires. I know, would have been smarter to do this step first though. Oh well, but after a first test, the result looked already pretty good. Yay! Next on, I cut out some space and glued the wires inside the foam. And yes, I would never ever be able to reach them again if anything breaks, but they are also not supposed to ever break, hopefully. Oh, and by the way, everything is controlled and powered by this little chip and a rechargeable battery. For the next step, I marked some areas, dremeled down the edges. I absolutely hate sanding, but at least it wasn't much. And finally the blades were ready to be glued onto the PVC pipes. All I needed was a ton of hot glue. Just had to make sure both blades were perfectly symmetrical. So far for the base. The next step was to cover the pipe with more LED strips. You remember the crazy rocket engine of the sword, right? It just got a little bit squishy here, but it would do the job.
All the wires were then pulled through the hole I previously prepared, and the ends were then soldered onto some connection plugs. To make sure none of the soldering joints get loose or anything happens, I applied a ton of more hot glue all over the strips and wires. Here went the plug, and now let's test if everything works. Just had to squeeze in everything super professional into the handle. And it lights up! Super proud! Next on, I covered up the pipe super roughly, wrote a little bit of code, and this was the result so far. I was really happy my plan from the beginning worked out. Now comes the real fun though, adding all the details. First, I wanted to finish the base of the grip. Therefore, Benny laser cut me a bunch of rings, which I then carefully stacked onto each other. So far, so good. The challenging part now was to Dremel them nice and pretty. At this point, you might also wonder why we just didn't 3D print the sword. Well, first, we didn't have the 3D model, and creating one from scratch would take too long. Plus, printing and sanding such a large piece would probably require 2 additional weeks. So in short, we had a tight schedule, and I'm much faster with foam crafting than we could 3D print a sword. We still used 3D modeling to create the blade edges though. Using the Papakura technique, Benny made a perfectly fitting template, printed it out, and I traced all parts onto 10mm LED foam, cut them out, and carefully glued them together. And with some glue on the blade, I could step by step cover up the LEDs and create a sharp looking translucent edge. Worked like a charm. As you can guess, this step had to be super precise and required patience though. Now I roughly covered the jet engine part with more LED foam and cut out some sharp edged pieces next. These will be my flame. I glued them on pretty roughly and did my best to shape the fire. I was already really happy with the result, even though I still had to fix the blinky and dotty rocket engine in the middle. With this done, I could finally add all the details though. I'm actually getting a lot of questions how long a project like this takes, but it's pretty hard to say. Benny and I worked for 2 weeks full-time in total on Mavuika's sword, but the laser cutter saved us a lot of time. Plus, we focused on the things we are really good at. Benny is great at doing blueprints, 3D modeling, laser cutting and painting. And my skills are mostly planning, foam smithing and electronics. So if you want to build something similar, totally go for it. But you might take a little bit more time as you might not have the same experience, skill sets and tools we do. Benny and I are a super efficient team. The next step was to finish the grip. This part was actually pretty straightforward and just needed a few details here and there. Nothing complicated really, except this weird hovering ring thing in the middle. I got pretty spontaneously the idea to connect it with magnets and cut out a little bit of foam for the attachment. Neodymium magnets and superglue did the job. So far, so good. Now let's check if it holds on the sword. Yay! Finally, only some last details were missing. I usually prefer 2mm EVA foam for this part as it really creates nice raised highlights. I also still needed the end of the grip and the cover for my electronics. Benny just laser cut me a few pieces, which I only had to Dremel a bit. Afterwards, it was another puzzle I carefully put together with contact cement. When it comes to builds like these, finding space for the microcontroller and battery can be really challenging. Therefore, we adjusted this part a bit, so I got more space inside. But I think nobody would notice the difference anyway. And with the pommel being done, this was the full EVA foam build. I was super happy with the size, the amount of details, and especially how the LEDs turned out. Now onto the painting.
And now you're probably wondering how you can build stuff like this yourself as well, right? Well, what a coincidence! I have books. For example, the book of Foam Props shows you exactly how to work with EVA foam and build really cool weapons like axes, swords, shields and all the things you want to build for your next costume. And the book of Cosplay Light and Sound Effects shows you exactly how to make the electronics I'm doing right now in this video. Everything step by step and very beginner friendly. You can get both books and also much more on kamuicosplay.com or in our Etsy store as a printable version or as an instant download. Thank you very much for your support, and now let's keep on crafting.
Before the fun could begin though, I had to heat seal the foam first. Afterwards, Benny spent quite some time priming the surface with 3 layers of Flex Bond. This primer dries out translucent, so it worked perfectly with the built-in LEDs. Okay, ready for the next step. Let's hope we pick the right colors. As always, Benny worked with Vallejo paints and his airbrush. Painting the translucent blade was actually pretty tricky. The color shouldn't be too covering as the LEDs won't be visible, but the application should be still bright and colorful for when the lights are out. There is no room for errors, and no, Benny wasn't nervous at all. And he had to repeat all of that with some orange as well. Next on, it was time to cover up all the yellow. While painting with an airbrush looks smooth and fast, the masking part slows down everything so much. By the way, we decided to create the non-ascended version of Mavuika's Claymore, as its darker look has a better contrast and let the LEDs pop more. Following that, Benny could cover the rest of the blade with a bright red. So far so good. This was just the beginning though. The red was the base paint, and we now had to mask a ton of details to apply more gradients and darker shades. Then, to speed up the process, we could at least use our laser cutter and get all the stencils super fast. And did I already mention that getting rid of the tape is the most satisfying part? And before you ask, we were using Tamiya tape and frog tape for masking. As always, you can find all product links in the video description. But now the hardest part was done. As you can see here, the LEDs were still visible. Next, we had to repeat the same step for the grip. As you already know how it was done though, let's speed up this step a bit. Luckily, the painting here was pretty simple, as we needed only a little bit of dark gray, brown and bronze. Finally, Benny added some details to the end of the grip. I still admire the beautiful design of this weapon. As you can see, even the very last bit is just as gorgeous as the rest. Same goes for the hovering bronze ring. This was painted pretty simple though. Almost done now, I promise. Only a few details were missing, which Benny had to apply with a brush by hand. An airbrush paint job always leaves little flaws here and there that just need to be fixed by hand with good old acrylics. Last but not least, I sealed the finished work with a few thick layers of matte spray varnish. The sword was obviously far too massive for a spray booth, but we still made it work somehow. Well, and that was it. Please enjoy the full glory of Mavuika's sword, 1000 blazing suns. We worked for 2 full weeks on it, and we are incredibly proud of how it turned out. In total, I built in 276 LEDs, and I'm so relieved that everything worked out just like I planned. Also, in case you want to build your very own version, we also uploaded the blueprint for free onto our website. And by the way, if you're interested to learn all of this, besides my books, I recently made a tutorial video explaining exactly how to create this kind of light effect. And I also have a ton of other tutorials for foam crafting on my channel. So make sure to check them out after this.
Thanks so much for watching, and I really hope you like this build. Like, I'm super duper happy because, you know, it was a very challenging project, and especially when I'm creating stuff like that, I always have like a certain plan in my head how to create everything from scratch, but I never know if it works out, and it actually worked out, and I'm really proud. And I think Benny did also an absolutely incredible job on the painting. It looks like so pretty, and yeah, we just absolutely love the result. And as always, please leave us a comment down below if you have any questions or any opinion or feedback or whatever. Or if you don't know what to write, just write down Corgi and join the Corgi squad. And thanks so much to Genshin Impact and Hoyoverse for the absolutely amazing collaboration and this lovely partnership with them. We already did so many things for them in the last few years, and it's always such a joy because I love their designs so much. So please check out the Genshin Impact, link in the video description down below. And as always, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Also, thanks so much to all our lovely Patreons for their support as well, and see you then in the very next video. Bye bye!